Welcome. This webinar is part of our educational series called Clinical Trials Explained, Know Your Options. Our goal with this series is to help patients, caregivers, and families better understand clinical trials so they can feel informed, empowered, and confident when exploring their options. So far in this series, we have discussed the foundations of clinical trials, how research advances to patient care, and actually using TriCan's navigation site to discover trials that are best for you. We've also discussed understanding the conversation with your oncologist. Today, we will talk about a couple real-time trials that are happening right here in Michigan. But please know that these trials go far beyond what we will discuss today, so we highly recommend that you use TriCan's website to see what might be a best fit for your specific case. A few housekeeping notes: all attendees will be muted and video will be turned off for the duration of the program. Please feel free to insert questions in the chat at any time. And this session is also being recorded so it can be shared with others who may benefit. My name is Annie Dalton-Flores, and I'm the Executive Director of Sky Foundation. I'm joined by Jamie Geyer, our business manager, who is behind the scenes and happy to help if anyone on this webinar needs help with connection. She will share her information in the chat if she's not done so already. Sky Foundation is a Michigan-based nonprofit organization founded by pancreatic cancer survivor Sheila Sky Castleman. Sky raises awareness and funds innovative research for the early detection and treatment of pancreatic cancer. But what makes Sky's role especially important is that we fund what's called seed grants in pancreatic cancer research. Every clinical trial, every new treatment, every advancement you hear about begins as research. And at Sky Foundation, we're proud to help fund those early ideas, planting the seeds that allow promising discoveries to grow into clinical trials. You can see a quick overview of the process on the left side of the screen. But what makes today's conversation especially important is that many of those opportunities are happening right here in Michigan. As a Michigan-based organization, we're not only focused on funding research, we're focused on strengthening it locally. This year, we've expanded our grant program to include a special emphasis on collaboration with Michigan-based institutions, encouraging researchers to work together and accelerate progress right here in our own community. Because when research is stronger locally, access to clinical trials becomes stronger as well. And access matters. Patients shouldn't have to search across the country to find options if there are opportunities available in their own state. And many times there are. That's why partnerships like this with TriCan Health and conversations like today are so important. We're helping bridge the gap between research and real-time access, making sure patients and families know what trials exist, where they are, and how to take the next step. We are incredibly grateful to partner with TriCan Health on this educational series. I'd now like to turn it over to Kimya Harris, co-founder of TriCan Health. Kimya, welcome.
Thank you, Annie. It's such a pleasure to be here, and we are honored to be co-sponsoring this webinar series with you and Sky Foundation. I am the CEO and co-founder of TriCan Health, and when we co-founded TriCan Health, we did it for one simple reason, and that was to make sure that every patient diagnosed with cancer has access to the potentially life-saving treatments available through clinical trials. And for those who don't know, and if you don't, I'm glad you're here, clinical trials are where every single new drug treatment gets tested before it is approved for patients to have access to. So the future treatments, the most advanced treatments of tomorrow, are currently in clinical trials today. And the only way to get access to them is by enrolling in a clinical trial. And unfortunately, the majority of patients don't know about clinical trials, and they don't know how to talk to their doctor about them, and they don't know how to search for them and find potential options. And even when they do, sometimes it's so complicated, they are quickly overwhelmed and stop searching. And TriCan wants to change that. We want to make it much easier for patients to find trials, to be educated about trials, to feel comfortable going to their doctor to ask about them, because we believe that knowledge is power. And we are starting our work first in pancreatic cancer. My background and experiences are what led me to start TriCan. I have spent my entire career in cancer research and cancer drug development. I did my PhD at University of Michigan, go blue, in cancer research, and since then spent all my years working in the field. And I really got to see firsthand what it's like to discover a drug, develop the drug, and then test the drug all the way to approval and making a difference in the lives of patients. But what probably informed my desire to start TriCan Health even more so was my personal experiences. I have also been on the patient side. I myself was diagnosed twice with breast cancer in my 30s. And at the same time, my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And despite fighting hard, she lost her battle 18 months later. And so I could see the need for both sides of that equation for clinical trials to be more accessible for patients. And that was the idea for TriCan. But what I didn't know was how exactly to do that. And that's where Mike Harris comes in. So I'll turn it over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Kimya. Like many things, it's the marriage of science, technology, people that makes things work. And in this case, a marriage has indeed worked well. Our last name similarity is not a coincidence. We're married. And Kimya's scientific and personal history with cancer, combined with my own background as a technologist and years spent in the IT industry, specifically building platforms to bring parties together to make a connection. We've applied that to TriCan Health to help bring patient access to these medicines of tomorrow. And as serving as moderator for today's discussion, what we'll do is touch on some of these exciting treatments that are happening right in the state of Michigan and highlight how you can find those so that you and your loved ones can have access to these kinds of technologies. So let me turn it back to Annie Dalton to review the other speakers for today. Annie?
Thank you so much, Kimya and Mike. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today. Presenting first will be Wendy Mitchell, West Michigan Cancer Center in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Wendy has been working in oncology clinical research since 2001, with extensive experience supporting NCI trials through the NCORP network, as well as pharmaceutical-sponsored studies and collaborations with regulatory affairs. She currently serves as a research nurse and research manager at the West Michigan Cancer Center, where her work is centered on putting patients first. A key part of her role is helping connect patients to advanced and innovative care through clinical trials, and she is passionate about fostering collaboration across the region to expand research opportunities and strengthen support for the communities they serve. Next, we will have Dr. Parag Parikh of Henry Ford Health in Detroit, Michigan. As you can see on his title, he has many hats and makes his impact spread wide across hospitals and institutions. Dr. Parikh is the director of MR-guided radiation and GI radiation at the Henry Ford Cancer Institute. He has a strong interest in pancreatic cancer clinical trials and recently completed the largest trial of ablasive radiation therapy in pancreatic cancer. Now, before I hand it off to our speakers, I want to give Mike the floor so he can show you a quick demo on how you can discover this exact trial we're going to be talking about today.
Thank you very much, Annie. And again, as moderator, let me just remind everyone that if you have questions, just enter them in the chat that's at the top of your screen, and you should be able to identify that area, enter any questions that you might have, and we will address those as we go through the discussion today. So if you are a patient, a caregiver working in an advocacy organization with patients, anyone has free and open access to this platform. You can see the address at the top. It's just tricanhealth.com. And there's a bunch of information on the site, including a number of articles to help inform you about things about pancreatic cancer and why to consider clinical trials, different phases of treatment, and so forth. But we'll focus today on finding a trial that might be relevant for you or a hypothetical patient that you might work with in the future. So you can see the first question is, what kind of cancer do you have? We're focused specifically in pancreatic cancer, and there are multiple forms of pancreatic cancer, as those of you may know. The most common form is pancreatic ductal adenocarcinoma, or what's often called PDAC. So we'll use that in this example today, and just click Next. If we identify the location, we'll say today we're in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Lovely spot. And you may or may not know the stage of your cancer. Your physician may have explained this to you as a stage, but if you don't know, just literally click I don't know. And we'll ask the question another way. It might be locally advanced or regional cancer, or it might be metastatic. And let's say, in this case, we'll assume that it is locally advanced. And we'll also ask you if you've had any prior treatments for your surgery. And in this case, we might say, well, we haven't had any treatment yet. And we, in terms of surgery being an option or not, we'll say, well, I'm not quite sure because I haven't yet had treatment. I'm very early stage. I haven't spoken to my physician yet, so we'll hold off on that piece. And we don't yet know if we have genetic markers or what's called biomarkers. We haven't been tested yet, so I'll just simply indicate this. Obviously, the more information you provide, the narrower the potential set of trials becomes, and we can help find some specific trial areas. And what you're presented with is a set of trials for which you might qualify based on those initial answers to your questions. And you can see that some are involving collecting blood samples. This one in particular is about testing a higher dose radiation therapy. That looks interesting for advanced pancreatic cancer. It's here in Kalamazoo. So I'm going to click on this and learn a little bit more about this trial. And what you'll see is that we can then pick up information on the radiation testing that comes to play, the trial sponsor, the location of it in Kalamazoo, the groups, and the two different groups in the trial enrollment, and other information about the trial that can help you understand what would be appropriate for this particular trial. So in this way, you can have an initial glance to say, this might be an interesting trial. I can then share it with my physician via email or a link. And that allows me to share information with my physician, perhaps with my family, and have a discussion with an oncologist to say, perhaps this is a trial that I should be considering for potential treatment. So that's a quick example of how to find a trial on TriCanHealth.com by literally just entering the bit of information that you know about your own disease, prior treatments that you might have, additional information that you might have from your physician, and then you can share that information with your physician to say, listen, perhaps this trial could be right for me. Would it make sense? With that, let me turn it over to Wendy. I'm going to stop sharing and let her take control of the screen, because once you find this trial and can speak with perhaps a nurse, an oncology nurse, or a navigator that's on site, and or a physician, you can then have a more substantive discussion on whether or not this trial might be a good fit for you. So Wendy, over to you.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to be here today. So this is a picture of the West Michigan Cancer Center. Like Mike said, we're located in downtown Kalamazoo. We're a 55,000 square foot cancer center with extensive clinical trial expertise. We are currently a member of the Cancer Research Consortium of West Michigan with strong trial enrollment. We are able to foster this with the collaboration with Beacon Health and Bronson Methodist Hospital. We function as an integrated regional research network. This coordinated system allows clinical care research operations, regulatory oversight, and trial infrastructure across the consortium. The result is an environment that supports broad patient access and consistent delivery of high-quality cancer research throughout the region. Here is the website. And like Mike said, TriCan offers the ability to then do a trial search. And then here is our direct email address. Specifically, what we wanted to touch base on today is the NRG trial, GI-011. It's a phase 3 randomized trial of dose-escalated radiation in locally advanced pancreatic cancer. This trial is a cooperative group trial, so it's available through the NCI, and we have access to it through the Cancer Research Consortium. So the background and rationale for the trial is that multi-agent chemotherapy in locally advanced pancreatic cancer standard of care. However, outcomes remain poor. Median survival from diagnosis is 18 to 24 months, and the role of RT is controversial. Randomized trials using standard dose chemoradiation after initial chemotherapy in locally advanced pancreatic cancer have not shown a survival benefit, but in single-arm studies of dose-escalated RT suggest a survival benefit, but this has not been shown in a randomized fashion or in a cooperative group large multi-institutional setting. So the study schema is a randomization of 1-to-1 for patients who have received 4 to 6 months of chemotherapy. Patients are then stratified based on what their previous chemotherapy was. Arm patients that randomized to arm 1, standard of care, either receive continued chemotherapy, standard chemoradiation, or observation. And patients who are randomized to arm 2 have the potential to receive dose-escalated RT, which can be given in 5 or 25 fractions. The primary objective is to evaluate whether dose-escalated radiation therapy improves the 3-year overall survival compared to standard treatments without dose-escalated RT in localized advanced pancreatic cancer patients without radiographic progression and with a biochemical response after initial interval of chemotherapy.
Hey, Wendy.
Yes.
I'm sorry, this is Mike. I just wanted to sort of try and reframe what you just had on the prior slide to make sure that I understand for benefit of others on the call. So
Yes.
It sounds like you can get randomized into one of 2 groups, and my understanding is that the patient doesn't choose which group they get assigned to. That is truly a randomized process. Yes.
Yes, so to answer your question, this is, and as everyone knows that's probably on the call, clinical trials are voluntary. What happens is that we do look for eligibility, and I'll go back to that slide in a minute, but patients either get randomized to arm 1, which is right here, and this is going to list out the physician has an option of one of the 3 following treatments. They can do either the continuation of chemo. Patients are encouraged to complete the total of 6 months. And either get the FOLFIRINOX or NALIRIFOX, or which contains the, I'm going to tell the individuals on the call what that regimens contain. So for the FOLFIRINOX, that is going to be the regimen that is looking at 5-FU, irinotecan, oxaliplatin. And then for the patients who are getting the NALIRIFOX, it is going to be the Onivyde, 5-FU, leucovorin, oxaliplatin. So patients per physician discretion could then either get standard chemoradiation. The dose fractionation will be 1.8 daily fractions concurrent with a 5-FU based chemotherapy or capecitabine, or patients treated with standard chemoradiation who receive less than 6 months of chemotherapy at study entry are encouraged to receive the remaining chemotherapy for a total of 6 months. Or these patients can get observation, which would be no further therapy. Again, it is recommended but not required that patients can, that the option be for patients that have already completed that total of 6 months pre-randomization. So that's for arm 1 patients. For arm 2 patients, these patients are randomized to either getting dose-escalated radiation therapy in either 5 or 25 fractions and the remaining chemotherapy as applicable. Again, there's strong encouragement on this trial for the patients to get that 6 months total of chemotherapy pre and post randomization. And additional chemotherapy beyond 6 months total is at the physician's discretion. And again, these patients are randomized. The provider does not get to pick which arm these patients are randomized to, nor does the patient or the research nurse. In order to be eligible for this trial, there is obviously the eligibility criteria that everyone needs to fit into in order to be enrolled, and that is that they are pathologically confirmed pancreatic ductal adenocarcinoma, locally advanced unresectable disease, which is defined by the NCCN, performance status of 0 to 2, and baseline scans that are performed, and I'll go on to those further, in greater than 18 years of age. Again, we talked about the requirements of patients getting 4 to 6 months of treatment. They need to be deemed to have no progression on the restaging scans, and a CA19-9 normalization or greater than 50% drop with a post-therapy value less than 100. So required tumor staging and characteristics are that patients should have no active duodenal or gastric ulcers, no direct invasion of the bowel or stomach, and the restaging scans show at least stable or no progression. The options can then be CT scan, MRI the abdomen or pelvis, or CT chest, CT pelvis, MRI abdomen, or PET CT prior to enrollment. And then patients must not be pregnant or nursing. And that is the end of my slide deck. There are currently patients, their target for enrollment is 356 patients, and they currently have 11 patients enrolled into the study. The other piece is that they will be doing interim analysis. These interim analysis will occur after the first 112 patients and then after 226 patients have been randomized into the study. Quality of life questionnaires are part of the study, as well as optional blood specimens.
Great. And as we transition to Dr. Parikh to discuss some of the trials that are available in the Detroit area on the other side of the state, what I think is interesting, Wendy, about what you just presented is that the trial itself either offers the approach of the radiation therapy, or you can get what's called standard of care, so what the patient would get otherwise, which is the normal chemotherapy regimens that you went through in some detail. So the good news is that the patient will be treated for their cancer, either for the new regimen, which is focused on radiotherapy or radiation, or the standard chemotherapy, which is what they would get otherwise. So that's a great example of, kind of how a trial often works. So thank you for that overview. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dr. Parikh, please take the stage and share with us the trials that you're working on around Henry Ford.
Thank you so much. Let's get the audio visual working. Try this. Okay, just want to make sure that we are able to see the screen. And
we're seeing the screen. It's in regular mode, not yet in presentation mode.
There we go.
There,
all
looks
right.
great.
So thank you. My name is Parag Parikh. I'm a radiation oncologist who specializes in gastrointestinal cancers here at Henry Ford. I'm kind of speaking to you from our you could call it our Henry Ford Detroit group. And I'm actually representing all these other people. Oh gosh, I missed Dr. Shah here. So we have 4 medical oncologists, Dr. Al Saheli, Dr. Diab, Dr. Khan, and Dr. Phillip, who specialize in gastrointestinal cancers with an interest in pancreas cancer. And then we have 3 surgical oncologists, Dr. Scott Kizzy, Dr. David Kwan, and I should have put Dr. Shah over here, who perform pancreas cancer specific surgery. We meet weekly, Wednesdays, so this morning, for about an hour to an hour and a half to discuss our patients with pancreatic cancer, both new patients and patients who are on treatment. And we see patients physically in most often in our Detroit center. We have a specific cancer center building across from the main hospital. So I wanted to talk about, first I really want to thank Wendy. I'm so excited that she presented the radiation question for patients with locally advanced pancreas cancer. And for those of you who are listening, you know that you are probably either you yourself or a loved one has maybe had or has pancreas cancer. And we think about it in general in 3 buckets. We have pancreas cancer that's resectable. It means that we can take the pancreas cancer and remove it from the surgically remove it. We have pancreas cancer that we call locally advanced, which means that It hasn't spread in different parts of the body, but it involves blood vessels that prevent it from being removed. And the study that Wendy mentioned is for patients with locally advanced pancreas cancer. And then the third, of course, and most common is pancreas cancer that is spread throughout the body, or we call that metastatic pancreas cancer. So since Wendy did such a fantastic job presenting LAP 100, the NRG study looking at the role of ablative radiation in this disease, I'm going to talk about two studies on the opposite ends. The study that we have open and that we are actively accruing is for patients with a new diagnosis of pancreas cancer that is resectable. And this is a personalized vaccine study. I put the NCT number. The NCT number, or National Clinical Trial number, is a great way that I'm sure um, Mike could talk to you about that identifies these clinical trials on like a national database. And that means they are on a US database called clinicaltrials.gov. And it's a great way that for those of you who are maybe looking and talking to different centers about trials, that you can write down that number and you can see if a other center has it, one that might be more geographically accessible for you. Because internally we have different numbers for these based on our institution. And so this study looks at patients who can have surgery, and after they have surgery, they are evaluated to see if there's enough tissue that they can make a personalized vaccine. This vaccine is based on messenger RNA technology, and it's based on the patient's specific tumor. And then there's a randomization between patients receiving the vaccine plus immunotherapy and plus chemotherapy versus receiving chemotherapy alone. And then those patients are followed up. So this is kind of our little key eligibility. It has our internal number for the trial. When we look at inclusion and exclusion, inclusion means things that you have to, as a patient, have to be matching, and exclusion, of course, are things that you can't have. If you are starting to look at clinical trials, almost all clinical trials talk about ECOG or KPS. These are fancy words for something that we call performance status. And that is a fancy doctor word of how well are you doing? When you have a good performance status, it means that you're doing everything in life that you could, and people may not even know that you have cancer. It means that you're able to take care of your own household. If you're of working age, you're working. If you're retired, you're doing your activities that you enjoy. And that means like a perfect performance status. Obviously, as cancer hits different people, the symptoms of pancreatic cancer can be really hard. And so then we might say a performance status of 1 is that, well, I can't do everything I normally do, but I can take care of myself. Many or most clinical trials look for patients who have good performance status. Patients who are feeling really bad, not able to get out of bed, there are not, unfortunately, many clinical trials available to those patients. So in terms of the rest of it, it just says what stage of cancer it is. This actually is a typo I can go. It doesn't require adenosquamous. It's standard adenocarcinoma. And patients who've had a resection of their pancreatic cancer, and they have certain blood test values. Things that exclude from this are any other sort of prior therapy. So nowadays in pancreas cancer, even if the pancreas cancer is resectable, patients are often getting chemotherapy before surgery. And so patients who've gotten chemotherapy even before surgery are not eligible for this study. Studies M1 means metastatic, so it's not for metastatic patients. T4 means that it's locally advanced and not an option for surgery. So those are exclusion criteria for this study. I forgot to ask Dr. Khan exactly how many patients we've had on this study. My last count, I think, is 4. And we screen for patients every week as we review all of our cases in our weekly meeting. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is a study that we don't have open yet, but talk a little bit about why we're excited about it. And this is for metastatic pancreas cancer. So this is a slide. These are slides from Dr. Phillip, who've talked about just the use of how much of regular chemotherapy we've gotten out of pancreas cancer. And frankly, we just haven't done that good of a job. So we look back on the last 30 years, and if we've tried different types of regular chemotherapy, we have not made much of a difference in terms of from being little less than 6 months to maybe over a year in these very specific patients. But still, for most of our patients, unfortunately, who have metastatic pancreas cancer, we have a hard time getting them to a 1-year survival. But we all know that these pancreas cancers, the most common mutation is this thing called KRAS. In fact, they teach us this all the way in the beginning of medical school. And it's 90% of these have this KRAS mutation. It was thought for a long time that we would not be able to ever find a drug that would go after KRAS, but the companies and scientists have been able to do a better job of this, and they've been finding that even in patients who've had a lot of treatment beforehand, a KRAS drug might really add a lot of months to their survival. The biggest thing that got us excited is this one anti-KRAS study was presented at our big American Society of Clinical Oncology meeting. It took patients who'd already had metastatic pancreas cancer, and their cancer had already gotten worse after 1 line of therapy. And they randomized the patients between the drug that went after the KRAS versus whatever else they could get, and they wanted to see how they were doing. This is a really interesting picture. We call this a waterfall picture. And basically, if we think about a waterfall, we have a change in how much the cancer is. So going up is bad. It means that the cancer got bigger or progressed. And going down means how much of it shrunk. And we see that in this small study right now, we only had a few patients where the cancer grew right away. And we had a lot of patients where at least shrunk or stayed stable and really meaningfully got shrunk. So in these patients, nearly over a quarter of their tumor shrunk by more than a quarter. So this is really exciting response rates that we normally don't see from a regular chemotherapy. And so really, really excited about this new medication that's going after the KRAS mutation. So, people are getting excited. Do we add this KRAS information to regular chemotherapy? Do we use it after chemotherapy? Do we get rid of chemotherapy at all and just give this kind of medicine? It is too early to tell. But one thing that we'll do here at Henry Ford that's going to be opening is we've been one of the sites selected to participate in this trial. It's called Resolute 303. It's going to take patients with metastatic pancreas cancer who haven't received any therapy yet. And it's going to randomize them between receiving the anti-KRAS drug, and chemotherapy, or chemotherapy by itself. Again, as Wendy described and as Mr. Harris kind of, emphasized, a randomized study means that it's a flip of the coin which treatment you would get. But this is the best way to study which combination, if any of these, are better than regular chemotherapy. So we're really excited about opening this study. I hope to be able to share with the Sky Foundation and others in Michigan Exactly when it opens. When asking Dr. Phillip, he thought it was about 3 months away. So thank you for your time, and I hope this was educational for you.
Very much so. So thank you very much, Dr. Parikh, for not only sharing the studies that are available now, but what's coming up in the near future, why that study is exciting. And it's great news that it's going to be available right there in Detroit area. That's fantastic. One question for you, if you could just touch on for a moment, and then I want to show an example of how to find some of these trials and others. You mentioned the performance status, what was shown as ECOG or ECOG. And you said that for most trials, it requires that the patient is in pretty good overall health, right? Able to do their normal activities, be that work or at home. To me, that indicates that it's always a good idea to look for trial options very early in your treatment course before you've either been weakened by a bunch of chemotherapy, which certainly happens, those side effects are tough, or if the disease progresses. So could you comment a bit on that in terms of how you counsel patients to look at trials, sort of when during their treatment path they should look at trial options, please?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. It's so hard when diagnosed with this disease to really want to get started on some treatment. It is true that looking at a first line study is probably often some of the best options that a patient can have. Because as you mentioned, that's when they're fit to look at different things. We do at Henry Ford get a lot of referrals that are later in the process after patients might have had their disease progress, as this cancer does far too often. And then they're seeing what's available. But because the patient is no longer eating and drinking well, lost a lot of weight, maybe not getting out of bed for most of the day, it's not really an option for any available clinical trials.
Okay, thank you very much. So what I'm going to do now for everyone online is I'm going to share that screen again where we were looking at potential trial choices. And it might be interesting to apply some of the things that we were just talking about to this search. So first thing I'm going to do, remember this is just tricanhealth.com. And I'm just going to clear filters from this page, which shows a couple of things. This is a view of all of the trials across the United States that are actively recruiting patients right now for various forms of pancreatic cancer. And what might be informative for everyone is to know that there are 379 actively recruiting trials today, either actively recruiting or not yet recruiting and sort of announced, that are available today for patients to look at. So there's a lot of options. Now, not all of them are going to be close to you geographically, but there are a lot of options across the country. So I thought that was helpful. Secondly, I'm going to say, remember we started out with the first example in Kalamazoo, if I'm in Western Michigan. In this case, I'm going to say I'm in Detroit. So I change my location. And what this site does, you might remember that Dr. Parikh identified something called the NCT number. You see that NCT right here. That draws from this national database from clinicaltrials.gov. It's done by the US government, NCI, and National Institutes of Health. And it identifies all of these active trials. What we've done is identify the ones, in this case, all of them that are within 300-mile radius of Detroit. There's 160 out of that total that are within that sort of distance from Detroit. And we've sorted them by which ones are closest to the city. And of course, you could choose other cities for where you might be located. And you can see a number of these different options for different trials. What's interesting to me is that you can also look at it by, for example, the line of therapy. Now, Dr. Parikh, you just mentioned a moment ago, you said patients who are looking at first line of therapy, meaning they haven't been treated. They sometimes call it treatment naive. And you would say if you're just looking for first line included, so in other words, if you're in first line, you're eligible for that treatment, you can see that there's still a number of trials, 88 trials within a driving distance from Detroit that would be perhaps appropriate for first line treatment for pancreatic cancer. So it's a great point that having access to that information could be very helpful. Second thing I'll mention as you're looking at these different types of trials, and something that we hear from our clinicians is they say, you know what, I'm really interested specifically in immunotherapy because I think that is a really promising aspect of new and emerging medicines for pancreatic cancer that should be of use to pancreatic patients. And then as I look here, I'm trying to see if I can find that vaccine trial that you had shown earlier, Dr. Parikh. I think it's right down in this realm, if I can find it. And let's see if it's on the last slide, the last one. Not quite, but we'll this way we can find specific trials that are appropriate for immunotherapies that are within the Detroit area. And for any one of these, come back up to Detroit areas. For any one of these, I'm able to highlight which of these trials would be appropriate. And then we can see the phase that the trial is in. I can click into the NCT number. I can get additional information on each of these trials. So it's a helpful way to view which of the trials might be most effective for me. I can share this information with my doctor, and then we can have a good discussion on which of these areas should be considered. If I take off some,
this site is so neat. Can you try looking at it based on vaccine? There it is, actually, right there.
There it is, right here.
Number 2.
Yes, exactly. So here, so we've able then to highlight it here, and you can see, to your point, the line of therapy. So I think if I remember in your inclusion criteria for this one, if I remember correctly, you had to fail the first line of therapy, right?
No, this is an upfront study. Yes.
Got it. Okay. So in this case, you'd be able to find that information here and the various treatment groups. And you can see one of the questions that we had online, and Dr. Parikh, you can address this. This study says that it is not blinded. Can you just explain what blinded means, please?
Yes. So a blinded study, so we talked about randomization, which means that it's not up to your physicians or the institution to tell you which arm you get. It's done by a flip of the coin. It's not in your hands. It's not in your doctor's or treatment team's hands. Blinded studies means that the study is trying to make sure that there aren't any kind of effects that your treating team, your physicians might do if they know you're on a study or they know you're getting something that might treat you better or different or with something else. And so what they do is they try to make sure that the doctors who are actually treating you don't know whether you're getting, say, a new drug or that you are getting standard of care. So that when the treatment orders, say it's a treatment that goes through an IV or a port, what gets given to you, it just says it's study, and we don't know whether you're getting the study drug or not. In the case of the vaccine, and because it involves the atezo drug, the immunotherapy drug, the physicians are going to know whether you've gotten the vaccine or if you're getting standard chemotherapy. So that's what it means when it says it's not blinded.
Excellent. Thank you. That's very, very helpful. You also mentioned, Dr. Parikh, that you can do this search to say, listen, I'm in Detroit and I want to see what trials are available near me. To your point, this trial is actually available at 31 locations across the country, and you can see kind of readily where those are. So if for some reason, you have a family member in Los Angeles and you wanted treatment there, you can actually see, well, here it is at USC Norris Cancer Center in Newport Beach. Lovely place to spend some time, by the way, if you're so inclined. But you can see where all these different options are from a location perspective. So that can be a helpful lens as well, in case you're looking for a trial which may not be available locally, but might be available near a family member that you can get access to. Wendy, if I can ask you to come sort of back on the screen here for a moment, because I wanted to ask you about this phase question. Now, the trial that you showed, which I don't have up right now, if I remember correctly, was a phase 3 trial. But can you just touch on, broadly speaking, what these different phases mean, just so folks in the audience can understand what the different phases are, please?
Yes. So basically what it is that if you're looking for a phase 1 study, that's looking at kind of safety and dosing. Those are smaller groups of patients that would go on to that trial. Phase 2 is looking at efficacy and side effects. So that's looking at, you're going to have maybe like a couple hundred patients on that. But that's looking again at efficacy and side effects of the drug. And then phase 3 is more comparison in monitoring. So you're confirming effectiveness, monitoring side effects, but comparing the new treatment against the standard treatment, which is often randomized.
Great.
And so that's going to be even larger group, pardon me, that's going to be even larger group, like hundreds to thousands of patients.
Perfect. Thank you. So what I'm doing here, just to kind of work in parallel with you, is to say, okay, let's add this added filter. If there are any phase 3 trials that are within this realm of Detroit, not so much. But if I am able to remove the filter for Detroit area, then I'm able to see some phase 3 trials that are for immunotherapy specifically. If I remove that last filter for immunotherapy, there's actually 20 phase 3 trials around the country. And then if I come back here to Kalamazoo, then now I'm coming back to the trial that you had just touched on, which is that phase 3 trial that you presented on earlier. So this is just kind of showing how we can highlight the area. This one, you can see all locations for this particular trial. There are 242 locations across the country, including those in Kalamazoo and elsewhere in other states. So very helpful to understand the different phases. Dr.
Can you zoom up and see for our group here in Michigan, how many sites have it open? Because we've been really excited to make sure this is available for all of our patients in Michigan. And you can see that it's a lot of us. And so if you are a friend or caregiver or a patient with locally advanced pancreas cancer, as Wendy mentioned, ask about this study.
Yes, indeed. And most in, the southern part of the state, but also up here in Tawas. So you've got a nice combination of sites just for this one trial, and there are others available as well. So it's great options. Dr. Parikh, one question that came in was about vaccine. So you mentioned there was a trial, I think that we looked at before, that was a vaccine trial. And for those of us lay people, we tend to think of vaccines as being preventative, not treatment sort of after the fact. Can you just touch on how that works, please, at a simple level for the layperson?
Absolutely. So that's a great way we think about vaccines as something that helps us prevent some sort of infection. And so to think about it for cancer is really different. When we're talking about using it for the treatment of pancreas cancer, unfortunately, we know that after surgery and we take out a pancreas cancer comes back most of the time. And that means over time, we've realized that we have pancreas cancer cells that remain in the body, even after surgery, and we take out everything we can see. By giving a vaccine, is some sort of, we can call it a treatment, where you take parts of the tumor and you attach it to something that your immune system can see so that your immune system can do a better job of fighting it off. That's how a cancer vaccine works. You are correct. In these patients, we're thinking that we've taken out all of the tumor, and what we're going after is just individual cells that might still be circulating through the bloodstream after resection of the pancreas cancer. We're hoping that the vaccine then helps the immune system go after these cells along with traditional chemotherapy and this immune therapy that also helps boost the immune system.
Excellent, thank you. So it's really it's almost like a belt and suspenders kind of approach. You're making sure you can attack the cancer at start, and then make sure that you've got the vaccine to clean up any additional remaining aspects and help the body combat against any future cancer recurrence. Yeah,
that's correct.
Terrific, thank you. I'm going to stop sharing this view for a moment because I wanted to get to one question that came in online. If you have any other questions, go ahead and enter them in the chat area. But remember, if you want to do any of these searches on your own, it's accessible. There's no paywall or whatever. It's just tricanhealth.com. But I'm going to stop sharing that for a moment because there was one comment that I will voice on behalf of the audience member who says that, nice to see you again, Dr. Parikh. I was a patient number 1 in your Meridian View Ray clinical trial for the 5-day radiation treatment. And this trial succeeded in making me a surgical candidate, and I am here today because of this trial. So thank you and your entire team, which is fantastic.
It's a great message, and I recognize the name, and I'm glad to see it. And I will say that it's part of that ablative radiation experience that's led to this bigger national study that Wendy presented today. And so we can even say for those on the call that part of, and not only, but part of then the background for that study is from here in the state of Michigan.
That's fantastic. Those are the questions that we had lined up for today. So what I'd like to do is just kind of wrap things up with a summary before turning it back to Executive Director Annie Dalton of the Sky Foundation. And by that, I wanted to highlight that there's nearly 400 trials for pancreatic cancer across the nation. You saw just in that one trial that we looked at, that vaccine trial, there were, maybe 24 locations across the state of Michigan just for that one trial. And I highlight this to show that there are options, and great options, for patients that are looking for some of the most advanced medicines and immunotherapy and vaccines and things other than that chemotherapy standard of care. Chemotherapy is great. It is a standard of care. The science and technology that went behind it started up to 30 years ago, sometimes longer. And there are some wonderful new medicines, treatments, therapies coming out today that you can have access to via clinical trials. Given that point about the performance score, it's important to consider your options for clinical trials early in your treatment process. And what I'd highlight is just always work with your oncologist, your nurses, your navigation team to identify your options and just have good discussions so that everyone can make an informed decision on what's right for each of you individually. And we just want to make sure that you have access to that information, can feel comfortable with it, and have good conversations with your medical team to make those decisions. Dr. Parikh, any final comments you would have? And then Wendy, I'll ask you, just do you have any final comments before turning it back to Annie Dalton? Dr. Parikh?
I think the only thing I would add is people who really understand pancreas cancer know that it's something that we have not solved. And they should be able to share the options that are available at their center. But when asked, they should always, they can talk about somebody at another center in Michigan who also has studies open. When Wendy and I were talking about a colleague in general over at Start Midwest, Dr. Chandana, even though he's not part of Henry Ford, we know he's a pancreas cancer investigator, and we then will, if we have a patient who's looking for a study, we'll ask them to go ask that patient to consider going to see him. I have a great colleague at University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Dr. Sahai. And so those of us who take care of this disease try to all work together in the state of Michigan. So please make sure you tell your either yourselves or your loved ones that it's okay to ask about other doctors. We all know each other.
It's a great point. I hear that doctors really encourage the asking for second opinions, and they welcome that and ask for that input. Great, thank you. Wendy, over to you.
And I echo the same sentiments. We definitely reach out to, Dr. Chandana at Start Midwest if seeking to see if there's trials up there that he has for patients as well. And we really appreciate all the work that the Sky Foundation and TriCan Health are doing as well. We're grateful for this opportunity today, and thank you for the support that you're giving this community.
Thank you both so much for coming on, sharing your expertise. I love the collaboration, the encouragement. It means everything to us and to the patients going through this. So we really appreciate your time, your expertise. And Mike and Kimya, we love TriCan Health's website. The navigation tool is so easy for patients, and that's really something that we want to spread out in the community. So thank you guys for putting that together, for all of you for joining us today. Before we leave, I just want to remind you guys, we have another episode coming up in 2 weeks. It will be on Wednesday, April 8th at 12 p.m. It will be over covering discovery and enrollment. We hope you'll be able to join us, but thank you so much for coming today, for learning, for advocating for your health, and we hope to see you next time.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.